Hi, Bob. Thank you so much for joining me today. And on behalf of I Need a Speaker, we are so pleased to talk with you a little bit today and learn a little bit more about yourself. So if you don't mind, could you just tell us a little bit about your history?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Nora. I've been in the digital space as far as marketing agency owner, digital transformation, and marketing specialist now for over 2 decades. I got in really early in the early 2000s. I started a digital marketing agency here in Nashville, Tennessee, where I live. And through that time, as I grew my agency and ran that for almost 17 years, the one thing that was a through line for me that kept coming back was the reality and the basic human connection, human condition, that no matter what type of business or communication or marketing, you always had to deal with human behavior and human psychology. It's funny that we think many times we've evolved so far as human beings and we have so much new technology and things are different. And really, we haven't changed that much. And so the value proposition for me, Noah, through my career in being a chief marketing officer for helping Fortune 100 and Fortune 50 companies like Disney and General Motors put together digital marketing and digital media strategies, has always been the through line of understanding how humans behave and how they interact and understanding what those demographics and psychographics can look like. And then being able to communicate and connect human to human. And now the work that I do now in my consulting and specifically in the AI advising roles is really helping companies, leaders understand the transformational and culture change as it affects human beings, and always going back to that behavioral understanding, because that's what's most important. And that's really what must lay the groundwork, especially in the context of artificial intelligence and the things that I talk about and advise on. This is a cultural shift. It's always a cultural change first. And then when people can understand that, then they're ready to talk about the technical change. But I think we get in trouble many times when we talk about the technical change, the IT, all the things that go along with the world that we live in, the social media, the platforms, without establishing what is the human connection and what is the human cultural change first that we must address. So that's really what I'm all about, is where technology and human flourishing meet. Those are the things I talk about, I advise about, and I consult about.
But that covers so many bases too. There's a far and wide, from psychology to things as relevant now as AI that people are trying to understand. I think that the consultations and the assistance that you're giving to people on AI are something that people need to know a little bit more about, because it's definitely not going away. Just touching on AI, I guess first, we can talk a little bit about that. In your consultations with people, I feel like you probably get this question more than anyone else about, oh, is AI going to take my job? Things like of that concern that people are thinking about now. What is your response to questions like that, and how do you advise people to go about their jobs, and if there's anything to do or not to do with AI, to use it as a companion rather than a competitor in their everyday life?
Well, I think, Nora, you just hit on it at the end there, is viewing it as a companion rather than a competitor. I didn't make up this next statement, but I think it's very, very relevant. And hopefully it's not too trite, but AI is not going to take away your job. It's people who are using AI could potentially take the jobs of people who aren't using AI. And so that's the way that you have to look at it. It's about reskilling and understanding not just what the new technology is and how to use it, but this is a culture shift. This is an intelligence integration, not a technical integration. And the way that I try to help people understand how to look at this about, should I be concerned? How do I use it? Is it going to take my job? AI is always going to need human beings to come along beside it and work along beside it. It can't run yet on its own without any human engagement. It is a sophisticated intern that you have at your side, and it is a room of sophisticated interns that can help you do the things that you do every day, do them more efficiently, scale them up, and help you to focus more on the things that you're really good at as a human being, while you're allowing a computer intelligence to work alongside of you to do the things that it's really good at and better at. And so that opens up a whole new world for us in our environments, but people have to rethink how they do their job. They have to become comfortable with thinking about how they do everyday tasks. And coming alongside this intelligence, and like you said, as a companion, not a competitor. But if we go hands off and resist it, I think those are the people who might be in danger of losing their jobs, because I think in the near future, the question is not, do I hire a person or do I hire AI? I'm gonna compare the resumes and the skills of a person who uses AI against a person who does not use AI, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Jumping a little bit into the business world as well, and a little bit into your past, from my understanding, you have a wide variety of experiences in helping businesses in their growing periods and just getting them uplifted and navigating that world. Can you talk a little bit about your experiences?
Yeah, my experience, my business experience is in communications, marketing, and scaling businesses. So startups and mid-sized businesses primarily.
Okay.
Really understanding. A lot of times in business, whether they're in startup mode or they're in scaling mode, maybe they've been around a few years. My skills and my consulting really focus around scaling humps that businesses have. So for instance, when we're talking about startups, they're like, we're a new business and we want to get to $1 million. We want to get to $5 million. There's a certain set of skill sets and platforms and strategies, depending on your market and your product fit, et cetera, that it's one thing to get to $1 million. It's another thing to get to 2, but it's quite another to get to 5 and then to 10 and to 15. That all has to do with the culture that you have. That has to do with the people you have in place, their skill sets. That has to do with the strategies and budgets. And that's where I can come in and say, as an outsider, you might need to adjust your team. You might need to adjust your strategies. You might need to rethink where you're allocating your budgets, because I've worked in my history with very large multi-million-dollar budgets in releasing large film projects, to working with automotive companies and their nationwide promotions, to the startups who are just kind of getting rolling and starting to sell products on Amazon and scaling up to a large $50 million company. Those are things, the wide range that I have. And so those scaling humps are really where I come in and say, all right, we've hit that $10 million mark. How do we go to 15 and 20? Those are the challenges that a lot of businesses have. And my education training is a master's degree in behavioral and organizational psychology. And I'm finishing up my PhD in generative AI and sociological effects of generative AI. So it allows me to have an interesting and unique perspective on technology and the workplace.
Yeah, compiling all of your education into one field like that, you allow yourself to see so many different lenses that a lot of people don't either recognize or don't have the expertise that you do. So you definitely provide a unique lens for people to definitely use as a resource, which is
I think so.
extremely interesting.
Hopefully.
Yeah, no, I couldn't imagine how it could not be extremely helpful. I think psychology is particularly so interesting to me, the way that people's minds work, and how that affects the workplace. It does affect the workplace. So to acknowledge that and kind of dive into that, I think is so interesting that you do that in a wide variety of fields. So moving forward a little bit into what you're doing now with Human Voice Media, could you talk a little bit about why you started that yourself and what influenced you to do so?
Yeah, after I got out of the running an agency world and decided to go into consulting and not have big staffs that I had to manage, I really thought through what would be my unique role and value proposition. And I believe that there's a coming renaissance of the humanities, of liberal arts, because this AI transformation and revolution is going to has started causing and will continue to cause is the realization that, like I said earlier, computers and artificial intelligence can do things so much better than us, but we can do so many things better than computers and artificial intelligence. And so what it frees us up, let me give you an example. One of my clients is a large educational resources organization in Connecticut. And I was up there recently for a couple of days of training around their AI integration to their administration groups. And I was talking to about a team of about 15 in their operations and facilities. And at the end of the 2-day training, I went around the room and one person said, this is going to help me save, at least an hour a day on things that I focus on. And I'm going to move that hour a day into having more one-on-one time with my staff members. And I thought, oh, that's great. More human engagement. That's what leaders need to be doing. And people were saying things that were similar. And then at one point, Nora, a gentleman raised his hand. And during this training period, up until the end of this second day, I had noticed him and made a mental note. He was very quiet, a little bit timid. And I could tell that maybe he wasn't comfortable in social settings as maybe other persons. So I was surprised when he raised his hand. And he said, he goes, this is really going to help me with my mental health. And I said, well, say more about that. Because it kind of took me back when he said it. He said, I get a lot of anxiety, and this is going to help me with my anxiety because I work in security and specifically online security over, several locations. And every day and every week, I have lists of things that I have to check off, and I have to make sure that every single one of them is checked off. And I have to line things up, and I have to verify. He's like, I just realized now that you've taught us that we can upload these spreadsheets and these documents, and I can tell this artificial intelligence to check off these things, to match them, and to make sure I don't miss things. This is going to help me with my anxiety and my mental health. Wow. And I was really taken back for a moment. I shouldn't be surprised. That's what Human Voice Media is about. Like, I believe that there is a world where we can push for more human enhancing and human flourishing and using technology in ways that allows leaders to get more one-on-one face time with their team that actually helps with the anxiety instead of contributes to the anxiety of people in your organizations. So that's really, if you were to say, what's the mission behind what I do, is understanding human beings and pushing for more human-centric usage of technology, artificial intelligence, et cetera. And so I kind of see it as a third way of when people say, is all this technology good or bad? Where do you fall on that spectrum? I usually say, well, I kind of fall on a third kind of plane where I always want to identify and look at the struggles and the concerns and the negatives, address them. But I also want to not throw the baby out with the bathwater to go, there's a lot of really good human-centric things that we can that we can do with technology if we approach it the right way.
Jumping off of the conversation that you actually had with that gentleman, it made me think of the book that I read a little bit about that you recently published, Our Digital Soul. And you talked a little bit about media trauma. And I think that itself is a huge word, trauma, and associating that with media. And I think that is a step that you're taking in the language that intrigues people on reading the book itself. So I guess two parts to that question. Why did you choose that language itself? There was definitely emphasis behind that and the approach that you were taking, that the media itself that we're surrounding ourselves with in this life can be damaging to us in ways, and also how the book itself and in your mission of what you're doing, how you approach helping individuals to avoid this.
In 2017, I believe I wrote a book called Finally Human, using digital media to restore culture and better our world. In 2022, end of 2022, beginning of 2023, I wrote a book called Our Digital Soul. And it's about that media anxiety, media trauma, and a path forward. Those books are kind of on the both ends of the spectrum, because one is like digital technology, social media for good. The other is the warning about digital media and its effects. And again, this is why it's so important that we're always balancing that tension. It's important that we don't go to one side or the other. And so to your question of why media trauma and what is it, I think we're starting to see now, even in that year and a half, 2 years since that book has been out, more and more confirmation of what I was talking about in that book with my co-author, Jenny Brown, who's a licensed marriage and family therapist. One of the things that both of us saw in our different practices was that more and more people were struggling with this idea of like, my life has changed. Yes, we went through COVID, but that even enhanced it. Why is there a ramping up of anxiety? Why do you see the Facebook files coming out that they had hidden, that said their psychological studies of the effects specifically on teen girls on Instagram, and just, there's so many things that if you dig, you can find. I think that it's really important to understand that our brains, as I referred to earlier, human beings, we haven't changed a lot in the last 15,000 years. Like, yeah, we have more technology and we might know more about the world, science, etc. But emotions, pain, disappointment, love, reaction to feelings of betrayal, feelings of joy, feelings of accomplishment, it's the same thing, right? We respond the same thing. What has changed is our technology. Like, if you were to go to a human being 10,000 years ago and shown them an iPhone, they would be like, what kind of witchcraft magic is this?
Yeah.
But it's the same brain responses and the same emotions, right? So what we have going on is, it used to be when I was growing up, probably not you, Nora, but when I was growing up, I lived in a world where we all took turns at experiencing life's ups and downs. And I may go through something or experience something, but I had friends and family and a community around me that would come around and empathize and help, and neighbors. And that was just the rhythms of life we all went through. But fast forward to today, we all see things simultaneously and experience things. And I share my ups, downs, joys, traumas, pains, successes with everybody else as you share yours with me. And I would argue that our brain's not really wired to handle that. So there was a study that was done. Do you remember the Boston Marathon bombing a few years ago where
Yes.
somebody bombed? There was a study about a year and a half later that haunts me to this day. It's been a few years now, and it was the catalyst for that book, Our Digital Soul. A couple of scientists at a university put together a study where they looked at about 2,500 people who were present and witnessed that Boston Marathon bombing. Half of those people, about 1,000 to 1,200, were physically there and present. The other half, 1,200 or so, that they interviewed and researched, viewed it online simultaneously and shortly after. And what they were measuring is what was the psychological and physiological effects of that event. What they found was the people who viewed it through media and online had higher rates of effects negatively than the people who were physically present there. And you go, how is that possible? Well, here's the logic and the science behind it. When we are at we are physically present in our bodies, and something happens. In this case, let's say a horrific bombing where people died, people were maimed, people were injured. There's several things that you respond, right? You might scream, be startled, and go hide under a table. You might run and try to help someone who's bloody and needs your help. You might call 911. But there's an experience that your body plays out fully. When you see it online from many different angles and many different times, your brain goes, oh my gosh, that's horrible. And your body says it needs to respond to that. But instead of allowing your whole body to respond and get that experience out fully, physiologically, what do? We go, oh, that's horrible, swipe. Oh, that's horrible, swipe. Oh, that's horrible, swipe. And we're compounding these micro traumas on top of micro traumas over and over and over and over and over again. And we wake up one day and go, why can't I sleep? Why do I feel depressed all the time? That's what the premise is of this book. And it's really diving pretty deep into that concept of how do this constant always on media that we consume and experience, how does it affect us? If you've ever seen these like National Geographic commentaries and documentaries, sometimes you'll see a lion chasing like a gazelle or something, and the gazelle gets away. The gazelle will go under a tree, and maybe you've seen this, maybe you haven't, but they'll sit there and they'll shake for a few minutes. Sometimes they'll run their little legs like they're running and like as they're laying down, and then they get up and they saunter away. What is happening in that moment, that mammal, and we're mammals too, they're releasing the anxiety, the stress, and their trauma that their bodies are trying to get out of themselves after that experience of almost being eaten by a lion and getting away. We as human beings used to have spaces for that. We used to have ways of dealing with those things. But with digital media, we bombard our brain and our psyche with those still, and our brains don't know the difference many times between what is real and what is not. So it could be a young girl or a young boy who sees their friends at a party that they weren't invited to. Maybe it's a horrific event in the media. Maybe it's a horrific beheading that a 14-year-old boy sees because his friend dares him to see it from some terrorist in another country. Those are things that affect us, and our bodies, like that gazelle, are trying to respond, but we never allow it. We just keep swiping.
I absolutely love the insight that you have to offer on that. I was so intrigued throughout that entire story and just like unfolding of how you got to writing the book itself, because I never saw it from that perspective, but that is so incredibly true, because when you're naturally in almost like a fight or flight situation, your body reacts as well as your mind. But when you just are on your phone and on your screen looking at something, you see it, you take it all in, and then you move on. And that's going to build up like anything else in life. Those things build up. So that honestly changes my perspective on the way that I do things like that, because I'm in the age range of probably being affected, one of the highest rates, I'm sure. So I think that's extremely applicable to myself, but also in general with everyone, because as we've discussed several times in media and social media, technology is more prevalent now than ever. So I think that's applicable to everyone. Pivoting a little bit to I Need a Speaker, and just asking a question on behalf of us to you to learn a little bit more. What are you looking for in your speaking engagements? What do you enjoy most about speaking, and what do you enjoy speaking about most, if anything?
I do enjoy speaking about the intersection of technology, psychology, sociology, and human flourishing. I also enjoy speaking about AI and AI transformation. I love talking about marketing and marketing strategy and that consumer behavior and behavioral economics in the context of marketing. So all of those things, but at the end of the day, it's getting back to the human-centric experience in the midst of those situations. There's a field of study that's very narrow and most people don't know a lot about it, but it's called media ecology. And I would say, if you could boil me down to what is it that you're all about, I would say understanding media ecology. And when we think of ecology, we think of environments, right? And how environments function and how we affect those environments and how those environments affect us, right? If you think about a traditional view of what is ecology, well, it's like, how do we take care of the environment and how does that environment affect us as a result and how do we affect it? You think of media as an environment, like right now we are in an environment. I'm here in Nashville and where are you? In
Pennsylvania.
You're in Pennsylvania, right? And all intents and purposes, we're like right next to each other. I see you on my same screen, you see me on my screen, but we're literally hundreds, if not thousands of miles away. So we are in the media environment right now. We're not in the real environment. And so how do environments, when it comes to media, digitally specifically, what are the effects, pros, cons? That's kind of, I guess, if you were to narrow it down, is media ecology.
Especially because I could see you actually implementing that in everything that you're doing. You could see how passionate you are about it. So that's incredible to see and to hear a little bit about everything that you've done, because I know as much as you've gone far and wide in so many different industries, I know that's just a little bit about your past. So thank you so much for enlightening myself and our audience a little bit about what you've been up to and what you're doing.